and welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 174. Today it's a feedback session, so we're going to be talking about giving feedback to a couple of images. Well, I've had two sent in. Nurije has sent me in an image, going to be talking about that, and Amarjeet sent me an image, which I'm not actually going to show you, though I will, of course, be talking about why and some of the ideas that have come off that, which I think are still interesting, so do stick around. Right now, we happen to be live, so if you are watching live and not watching the recording, then leave a message to leave your name, tell me where you're from, tell me what the weather's like where you are, and we'll make a start. So yes, and welcome. So yes, here we are, live on YouTube, and unless you happen to be watching the recording, in which case there's 173 other episodes you can go and check on, so make sure you subscribe, click the little notification bell, can also click like down here somewhere. Their algorithms always like a like, certainly helps a little bit. So yes, what are we going to be talking about today? So, yes, there's a feedback session, a little bit of feedback, but we're going to be talking, well, one of the things we're going to be talking about is purpose of photo, but I'll come back to that. Right now, I see we've got a couple of people in already, and Pat says, hi from Minehead, which is a bit sluggish today. Susan says, hi from Kakubri, dull, wet, cold, and miserable. And that's just me. Oh dear, Susan, that's not so great. Hopefully you can cheer up a little bit with this. April says, hello everyone from a partly sunny, cool autumn day in Long Island, New York. Oh dear, Pat's feeling a bit the same as Susan. Maggie says, yes, just the same as Susan. Is that the weather or is that how you're feeling? Janet says, hello from a sunny but chilly Mississauga. This is in Ontario, Canada. April says, you can come here and visit me in New York, Pat, Susan and Maggie. And Nurije's joined us and says, hi everyone from a wet and miserable Exmouth. Right, okay, so we have people in. We have pictures to look at. We have a podcast to go ahead. So, yes, what are we going to talk about? So, what I will, give me a moment while I try and find all the bits and pieces that I want. So, what we're going to do is we're going to start with Nurije. So, Nurije sent in this image, and she said, now I just need to wiggle things around. Oh, before I get to that, I will just say Happy Diwali. Happy Diwali, everyone. Yes, VG reminded me that today is the celebrations, I think it's New Year in the Indian calendar, Festival of Light, Diwali. So, happy Diwali to VG, Amarjeet, Suba, and anyone else who happens to celebrate it. Right, okay, so Nurije took this one, said, took this the other week, but I'm not quite happy with it. I wanted the fungi to be in focus more, but obviously failed. These are the settings: shutter speed, 1/80th, aperture f4.5, and a macro lens. Thank you. Right, okay, so what Nurije's been doing then is getting out into the autumn landscape, fungus flying about all over the place the last few weeks, and getting right down low. She's got a macro lens on her camera and has taken this photo. And part of it is in focus, and if we look at this, what we can see is the front part of the edge here is in nice and focused. And then what we also notice is that there's a little bit of bark on the tree here, which is in focus, and a little bit of grass. But what we can also see from this is that there's not a lot in focus. I mean, what have we got there? We've got really a few millimeters, less than half a centimetre, about 3 or 4 millimeters or whatever, which is actually in focus before it drops out of focus on either side. So there's a thin line of sharpness, and then the rest of it moves into blur. And the further away you get, the increased blur it gets. So we can see fairly sharp detail in the little blades of grass or moss here. Detail's pretty much gone here, and by the time you get back to here, no detail at all, just a splash of colour. So the further away you move from the focal point, the more out of focus it is becoming. And so the thing is what she has is an f4.5. Now, if this is on a macro lens tends to be zoomed in quite often 100 millimeters or something like that, and your depth of field can be very, very narrow. And this is what we find here, that there's not a lot, so that the front part, the edge here is in focus, or even sort of, we notice here, even this bit of edge is in focus, and this bit of edge isn't. That little bit of edge slightly is. So the focal point isn't even on the edge of the mushroom. It's actually just fractionally back into. So from about here to about here is where it's actually sharp in focus. And so ultimately, this is what we're up against. If we want to be able to take photos and we've got a narrow depth of field, we've got to be extra careful where that narrow depth of field happens to focus. Now, if you're on autofocus with your camera, it's going to latch onto something. It usually latches onto where there's a contrast between light and dark. So sometimes that would give you, it sometimes will latch onto an edge here because you've got a darker bit there and a lighter bit there. But it's not guaranteed. And at the point that it latches and then you go click, you might have wavered with the camera. And we can tell here, a millimetre or two actually makes all the difference. When you've only got something like 4 or 5 millimetres to play around with, leeway, then literally a millimetre movement of the camera can make the difference between what bit's in focus and what bit isn't. So what do we do about something like that? Ultimately, what you need is a deeper depth of focus. You want something with a bit more leeway on it. And now you've got this set at an aperture of f4.5, which is quite wide, certainly for a macro lens, which gives you quite a narrow field. Now, if you were to narrow that aperture, so what you would do is get a higher number, because an aperture number, f4.5, think of it as like a fraction. So 1/4/4.5. So 1/6, so an aperture of 6, for example, would actually be smaller. An aperture of 10 would be even smaller. It could be like 1/10. An aperture of 22 would be much smaller again. So the larger the sort of f number, the smaller the size of your aperture, because it's working on fractions. So if you were to take something like an f 5.6, an f 10, 12, 13, 16, 22, it would give you a much smaller aperture, but it would give you a deeper depth of field. So more would be on focus from front to back. So if we were looking at this little bit here, where we can see there's only about sort of 4 or 5 millimeters worth that's in focus, if you were to get an aperture which was narrower than that, you might get, say, from there to here, that's in focus. And if you've got that, then at that point you might have the front part of the mushroom and the stem in focus, or most of it, or in focus enough. However, the problem you're up against then is the narrower your aperture, the less light that's getting in. And we can already see with this that it's it's tucked down. It's not sunlight getting straight onto it. There's not a lot of light to begin with. So Nurije's down to 1/80th of a second, probably quite high ISO. So for this, you would then need to go for a much slower shutter speed. And for that, you probably need to either have a tripod or to rest your camera on a rock, on a beanbag. We've talked before about, and I have walking around, I don't actually have one to hand here, but a little beanbag which you can sit on a stone and what have you, rest the camera on it and it will stay quite steady. So things like that are where they really work. The other alternative is to put a bit more light on it yourself if you've got an off-camera flash or a strong torch or something like that. And what I thought I would do actually is I'll show you a couple of things where I've done this. So I think it was last year I did talk about photographing mushrooms and toadstools and what have you, and here we can see a very similar kind of thing going on. Only what I've got here is I've got this set at an f13. So an f13 is giving me a bigger depth of field. Now, it's still not perfect. It's nice and sharp at the front of the mushroom here, but it's sort of out of focus on the stem. But that didn't really matter so much with this particular photo, because actually the interesting bit of this toadstool is the fact that it's this fluting, and it's the layers that feel like kind of concertina paper that are kind of moving out here. That's the bit that's interesting. And then what I've done here, just to add a little bit more interest, is I've got a torch with an orange gel, just a little piece of orange plastic or acetate or something in front of it, which is then giving it a yellow glow, so that when I cut that bit out later, if I edit that one out, then it's almost like there's like a little bit of reflected sunlight bouncing onto the fungus. So that's one of the things you can do. So a little bit of extra light, you can play with the light and shadow, but you're going to have to go for slower shutter speeds. Another option here is what I wanted to show you again, the difference with the torch. So it's not that you're looking to really blast everything out, but maybe you're just wanting to lift in some of the shadows. So with this one, for example, now do I still have, what was this? This was a 15th of a second at f13, ISO 1000. And so there's enough light coming down to be able to light up the top of the toadstool. But you can see actually underneath here it's all really dark. So I set up a torch here and then put it on. But first of all, I pulled it further back, and then and you can see that it's just started to light up because there was really interesting kind of spongy texture underneath. So then I move the torch a bit closer and it lights up a bit more, and I bring it closer again and it lights it up even more. So now we've gone from So let me just show the first one. So we've gone from that to that, okay, just by kind of moving the torch a bit and playing around with this. Now I've zoomed in fractionally more as well with that. So the rest of the light is the same. The rest of the ambient light is the same, but that torch is just lighting up those little bits of gills. But like I said, a 15th of a second is too slow for me to hold by hand, so I've got this resting probably either on a beanbag or a patch of moss or something like that. So hopefully then, Nurije, that kind of gives you a couple of ideas to play around with your mushroom photos. So really what you're thinking about is when you're using a macro lens is you have a very narrow depth of field. So you need to narrow your aperture, which will give you a deeper depth of field, allow you to get more in focus. The problem you have with that is the fact that you're not going to get as much light in. So you either need another light source, like a torch or flashlight or off-camera flash or strobe, or you just have to have it on a much slower shutter speed to allow more light to come in. So hope that makes sense. Hope that gives you a few ideas to play around with. But thanks very much for sending that one in, Nurije. Okay, a couple more comments here. Where are we? And April says, mushrooms are hard to get because they're so low. I actually like photo regardless of the focus issue. Actually, quick, let's a quick tangent here, because I did throw in another one. Just what I was going to say is, yes, they are very low, but in a way, that's where your phone can come in. What I love, and I think I remember talking about this last year, was the fact that the great thing about your phone is the camera tends to be usually right at the top, or one end of the phone, and you can get right low. If you you can very often kind of either get your phone camera down underneath and be kind of looking up at the gills, or sometimes you can kind of drop down into little spaces and rocks which you just wouldn't be able to get your camera, and certainly your camera and your head, into to be able to focus. So I mean, if I show you this one here, this was one that was taken on the phone. There was a little gap in between. You can see the rock here and the mossy rock over on the right, and this lovely little kind of mushroom kind of sticking up here with a bit of web running over it. There was a little bit of bounce sunlight just kind of coming in over in the corner here, just lighting up a little bit, and I wanted to get something of that, and it looked interesting, so I just lowered my phone into it, and I'm kind of angling myself a bit. But because that can get down to places where sometimes your DSLR or your mirrorless camera can't, never forget these things. Very handy. So I thought that one was worth just kind of going off on a wee tangent on. Right, so where are we? Oh, Meg's joined us and says, hello, I'm here now. Nurije says, yes, it has a macro lens, forgot to mention it. Pat says, glad you're here, Meg. All right, everybody's chatting to Meg now. Marilyn says, hello from a sunny Colorado. Hi, Marilyn. And Nadia says, hello from Fife. More people coming in as they come in. Okay, everybody's chatting about. Where are we? Oh, John's also joined us from Ohio, says, coming in late. April says, is a torch also a flashlight? Of course, yes. Yes, it is. This is me forgetting about the need to translate between English and American. So, yes, basically, I'm a very small one here. But, yes, in the UK, we just call this a torch. In North America, yep, flashlight. It's exactly the same thing. That's all I'm talking about when I mention a torch. Susan's gone on to say, yes, it is. April was wanting to make sure we're not talking about different kind of camera equipment. Don's joined us from Northumberland and says hello. April says she loves fungi photos. Nadia says, depending on the tripod used, then focus stacking could help as well. Yes, that's another whole kind of area of photography and editing as well, which is, I'm sure we've talked before briefly about the idea of like HDR, where you take different exposures. So you take a photo of say you've got something like you've got a sunset, but with silhouetted things in the foreground, but you don't want them silhouetted. But if you expose for the silhouetted bits, say the trees or something, then the sunset will blow out. So you take 3 or 5 different photos. You take a photo where you're exposed for the sky, photo where you're exposed for the trees, photo where you're exposed for the undergrowth or something, but at different exposure levels. And then there's a lot of editing software, Photoshop for example, where you can then essentially put it in, press the button, and it will merge the 3 together. And then you can twiddle around with little sliders to make sure that you get the right balance that you want. So it allows you to merge more than one photo. Focus stacking is the same kind of idea. And you can do it if your camera is absolutely steady and you're taking exactly the same photo of exactly the same thing. Then essentially what you do is you take a photo of them, so in this case with the mushroom or the toadstool, of the front of it, you adjust your focus 5mm back in, and then another and another and another and another, until essentially you've got, say, 5 or 10 photos which cover the whole depth of the object that you're photographing. And then in your software you can stack them up. Now I'm not going to try and show you how to do all that in Photoshop just now, but the fact is you can do that kind of thing. So yes, focus stacking is another thing. So thanks for mentioning that, Nadia. Okay, Nurije says that's very helpful feedback, Kim. We'll go back and try again. Thank you. Excellent. And make sure I've got a torch or the phone with me next time. Yes, and don't forget, of course, your phone quite often has a torch as well. So if you are using your camera, as long as you don't need both at the same time, use the torch on your the flashlight on your phone as well. And April says, definitely will bring my small pocket-sized flashlight. Very good info. Excellent, cool. So, a little reminder then that if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, and you would like to support them, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways to do it. Don't forget also that you can find me in other places on the internet as well. You know, little bits up here from my website to Facebook to Instagram, all that kind of stuff. Well, I've still got a Twitter handle here, even though it's no longer called Twitter and it's just X. And to be honest, I don't really use that one much. But other places your Instagram feed is usually there. What else? Okay, so yes, now what we're going to move on to. Actually, just before I get onto that, just a point now that with the feedback sessions, this is your opportunity to get feedback on your particular photo with your particular issue, just like we've done with Nurije here. So if you are struggling with a particular technical aspect or lighting aspect or compositional aspect or even conceptual aspect of something, if you're wanting help, if you're wanting feedback on a particular photo that you've taken which you feel isn't working the way you wanted it to, or you're wondering how you might have made it better, then send it to me. Okay, this is one of the few places on the internet where you can get free feedback on your images that's directly related to you, and anything that's related to you is going to relate to some other people here. So just as we've been talking about giving this feedback to Nurije, April's now aware that she can take a flashlight with her into the woods as well for the same kind of photography. So you sending in an image doesn't just help you, it helps the others here as well. So make sure you send your images. Next week will also be a feedback week, so send me your images. And of course, if you don't send me any images, these podcasts end up very short. So I'm sure one of these days there's going to be a hello, welcome to Understanding with Kim Ayres and Photography with Kim Ayres. Next week we'll be talking about I'll see you then. So make sure you send me your images, otherwise we have no content. Right, okay, so next thing then. What I wanted to move on to here was Amarjeet. Now, this is a kind of an interesting one, because Amarjeet's photo, I'm only going to show you that. I'm not going to show you the full photo. And the reason for that is the content of it. But it was an interesting idea because when... basically, well, let me read what Amarjeet said. okay, and then we'll move on to all the other stuff I'm talking about. So Amarjeet said, I've attached a photo of a partially burned dead dog. Okay, so I'm sure some of you at that point, a partially burned dead dog, will be kind of relieved that I'm not showing you the full photo. And to be honest, it is pretty gruesome. He says, it's a pivotal scene in our upcoming short film, Faye, F-E-Y, Faye. The image also features prominently in the film's poster. I'd love to know your feedback on this picture. Does it look cinematic, and does it show any kind of story? Because it's going to be part of a documentary type short film. So, this was an interesting point, because what do? I've just been sent a picture of a dead dog, which is a really quite unpleasant photo. And I know the moment I see it that I'm not going to be showing it on here, because there's various people I know who watch these podcasts who aren't expecting to see a gruesome photo of a burned dead dog when they turn on here. And I don't want to lose any of my viewers. I don't want to spring that kind of thing on you. Now, it might be that where Amarjeet is, these kind of things are around all over the place. It's not such a big deal. For me, it is much more of a big deal. I'm not used to seeing these images being flashed up in front of my face. I have a terrible problem with watching a lot of the news at the moment, and not just at the moment. For years, they've been doing it. It's like news reports seem to be getting stronger and stronger and stronger with the images that they're prepared to show. And there comes a point whereby I just can't stomach it. So I end up switching off. And so, in a way, it backfires. The intention of the news programme to try and shock me into action backfires in the fact that I can't face watching the news, because I get so upset by it, I end up switching it off, and I no longer watch news items on TV. And I think the problem is for the people who are reporting it, they are so used to it, their tolerance levels have changed. And so they can tolerate much stronger stuff than I can. To give a different kind of analogy, my wife and I were talking this morning about our son, Rogan, and his ability to tolerate hot chili. I have virtually the slightest bit of heat, and I'm already kind of go, where's the water? I have very low chili tolerance levels. My son has built up his chili tolerance levels over the years. His partner comes from a culture where chili just goes in with absolutely everything, and so he's sort of built up his tolerance levels to try and match hers, though hers are much more natural, which is sort of coming about from childhood, high chili levels. And so for my son, if he's making something, he would go, that's okay, fancy a bit more spice, I'll put a bit more chili in. Whereas actually, even at his point where he's going, needs a bit more spice, would be too hot for me already. I have a lower tolerance level for chilies. So likewise then, when we're coming to looking at certain pictures and certain gruesome pictures, we've all got a different level of what we consider to be gruesome or tolerable. Now, given that this is on YouTube, I don't have any kind of rating. I don't say this isn't for kids, or I don't say this you've got to be over 18 or you've got to be of particular disposition. These podcasts are open to all. Then I think showing pictures of a burned out dead dog to when there might be children or just people of stronger sensitivities, I'm not going to do that. However, it did sort of set up a whole bunch of thoughts. Initially, I was just sort of going to say no, and I started to write an email back to Amarjeet to say why I wasn't going to show it. In the course of writing the email, I then started thinking there's a few interesting points about why I wasn't going to show it. And so I thought this is something worth discussing. And I'm going to show you some other photos, which is okay. These are perfectly safe photos. But it's about the notion of purpose. What's the purpose of your photo? And I think it's really, I mean, I talk about it all the time. But I think it's worth actually let's take this opportunity then to explore the notion of what do I mean by purpose with the photo? What's the narrative? What's the intent? I'll just see a couple of comments here. Oh, April says, yeah, that's terrible. Dogs are precious to me. April, and she agrees with me. Susan also agreeing with me for not showing the image. Okay, that's fine. So let's talk for a moment then about this notion of purpose. When you have a photo, when you take a photo, when you decide you're going to show that photo, look at that photo yourself, or put it up online, or show it to somebody else. One of the key aspects of photography, one of the first things I tend to ask on almost anything, whether it's sent in for feedback or somebody's asking me to take a photo for them, is what is the purpose of this photo? Who's going to be looking at it? And what thought, feeling, mood do you want that person to take away with them when they look at it? What reaction do you want when they look at it? Okay? And this is a really important point. It's about truly understanding. I think it gets to the absolute heart of the matter of what photography is about. When you take a photo, somebody is going to be looking at that image and they are going to have a reaction to it. And if you understand who's going to be looking at it and the reaction that you want them to have, then that is the bit that underlies all the decisions that you make then on the taking of the photo, on the setting up of it, on the composition, or if you're taking an existing photo, how you edit it and how you present it. Okay, so I thought I would talk a little bit more, just give you a few examples then of this notion of purpose. So don't worry, you can. I'm not going to show you any burnt end dogs or anything. Let's start with. I took a photo and of. Now, some of you will have seen variations of this photo before. So let me just show you this one. Okay, so I was in a cafe once, Earth's Cross Bakery. In fact, I was with my daughter having a cuppa down there. It doesn't really matter. I had an espresso, and I was halfway through the espresso when I suddenly realised that this beautiful bright yellow cup was sitting against this really beautiful textured strong blue tablecloth, table covering. And I thought, oh, that looks like the kind of thing that would do well in the likes of PhotoCrowd or Guru Shots or some of these online photo competitions. You've got a lovely geometric shape, you've got these really strong contrasting colours. So I happened to have my camera on me, I leaned over, looked straight down, wiggled backwards and forwards a bit, turned the handle so that it was sticking out directly out the side, angled the spoon so it was going off at a little bit of a diagonal angle, and I thought I like that, and kind of leaning over and as best as I could tried to get a straight down. And I thought, oh, that's quite cool. I like that. Now, the problem was essentially that I was halfway through the cup. So what we can see here is we can see the stain, the residue of half of it gone, and a little splash on the side here. And that's all very well if you're going for a half, but I also know from experience that when you're putting photos into these crowd voting shots, like crowd voting sites like PhotoCrowd and Guru Shots and ViewBug and what have you, generally speaking, when you're talking about a crowd votes never really respond very well to residue and markings. And much though I might think, oh, I really quite, for part of me, the fun of this is the residue. If I'm thinking about the purpose of this photo isn't to go on my website as some kind of arty thing to show the world that I do arty photos. This is going on a crowd voting site. So the purpose is to try and get as many votes as I can from the crowd. So what did I do? I cleaned it up in Photoshop. So I went from that to that. So going in, spending however long I spent, I lightened up, I cleaned off all the bits and pieces, made it a nice little kind of cleaner shape, so it looks like it's not been drunk from yet. And consequently, this it's not a bad score. I don't think it's ever actually won a competition, but actually, having said that, it did get commended in one of the ViewBug ones recently. So yeah, but it's not a bad scorer. And if you're putting it in for something which is entitled Coffee from Above, contrasting colours, geometric shapes, anything like that, this is quite a good fun kind of shot to do. Nice and square, good Instagram kind of image as well. But then once you've got this, there's a different, there's other competitions. And so with a different competition and a different title, you now have a different purpose. So so sometimes you come across ones which are called, say, complementary colours. And in complementary colours, they're looking for pictures which are blue and orange, or red and green, or yellow and purple. So at that point, I changed it to orange. Okay, so now I've got, and all I've done is I've selected the yellow in with hue saturation slider, and I've turned it to orange. And now I've got an orange and blue. So exactly the same cup, still cleaned up, but now I can enter it into a complementary colours contest as well. And in actually some, just where it says about 2 colours or strong colours, actually I've tended to find the orange and blue always tends to feature better than yellow and blue, unless the competition specifically says yellow and blue. Very often the orange works better. But then sometimes you come across another one. So something might be, say, red and black. So you play around with it again. Colour shift it to red, and then you take the blue and you desaturate the blue and you make it black. Okay, so different purpose, different group, different title, same image. I'm now editing and adapting to fit to the purpose. Because there's no point, if there's a competition called red and black, there's absolutely no point whatsoever in shoving in a blue and yellow or blue and orange image. Or sometimes people will ask for black and white, and sometimes there's even, I've come across things called yin yang. So I did another little variation on this where I've gone black and white, and I subtly nudged the, if you can see here, what's happening is there's a reflection in the, I mean, it's not a strong reflection because this is coffee, after all, it's not water or a mirror, but this bit of shadow is probably my head leaning over, and somewhere lost in here will be the camera as well, as I'm kind of pointing it at it. So I subtly manipulated that and then put a couple of little dots. So we've now got a yin-yang symbol in it as well. So another little bit of fun. So we've got geometrical shapes, black and white, circles, yin-yang, whole bunch of other competitions and contests that I can suddenly put this in for. So that you take the one image, and there's all sorts of variations you can do upon it depending on the purpose, depending on who's going to be looking at it and what reaction I want from them. So each of those editing forms is, the editing is done with in mind the viewers who are going to be looking at it and their judgment that's going to be upon it. And my purpose is to try and score more highly in the online competitions that I've put it in for. Okay, couple more comments. Oh, VG's joined us late. Wishing us happy holiday. Oh no, April's wishing happy holidays, and VG's saying it's Diwali. So yes, so glad you could make it, VG, and happy Diwali to you, your family, and everyone you know. And oh, Nurije says, I do like the yin yang one. Excellent. So that then is to show you then that you can take an image and you adjust the image to the purpose. So let's show you another set where, again, some of you may remember this photo I did of Cafe Largo. So this is a covers band, did this a few years ago. We went down to the beach on a wild day. I've talked about this one before, but what I quite often use this one for as well is I've used this one as an example of cropping. And cropping is another thing that comes with purpose. So now, there was a whole bunch of purpose within this in the first place. So we've got a band, and the band are wanting to give across a particular feel. They do a lot of cover numbers, usually from the kind of 1950s to 1970s. They're full of nostalgia. So we're wanting this kind of sort of nostalgic feel, so the outfits that they've chosen, but also we're referencing in this, there's an artist called Jack Vetriano who has a particular style of painting, and we're referencing that, so anybody who understands Jack Vetriano style paintings would get the reference, so it creates something extra for them. So there was a whole bunch of purpose that went into the creation of this photo. But the other thing, but just like we had purpose for how I edited the colours in the coffee cup, here what I wanted to show you is this is like the full size version, but then there's the purpose of where it's going to appear. So actually, this has got lots of space around it, which isn't necessarily needed. So for the most part, I tend to crop it in. And if I'm sort of putting it onto a postcard, for example, then actually having a closer cropped version works better. But then if you were doing Instagram or certain other social media, or you wanted it as your avatar or something like that, then actually a square version works better. So understanding that this might appear somewhere else, or if you were to even have it as a CD cover, you would need it to be square. So with a different purpose, we're then going to crop it in a different way. This then is cinematic, or really it's a banner. This is the banner crop. So this is for the Facebook header. This is for the banner on the website. Okay, so at this point we've lost some of the lovely reflections in the sand, but it didn't really matter because the purpose was about it being able to fit this kind of crop to be able to go at the top of a website. Once we understand that, then we make other decisions on the crop and everything. So that's the way this one. And then there was another purpose, which was occasionally what they wanted to do was they wanted to isolate these two dancers on the left if they were promoting the idea that rather than playing as a performance, that it was also, they were say playing a tea dance where they were expecting people to get up and dance to their music. So I did another version where I cropped right in, removed the person overlapping just there in Photoshop, and then this becomes an image in its own right. So from our original, where are we? From our original, this one here, we can see that we've got a whole bunch of different options that we can play with. Okay, so again, what we're talking about is the notion of the purpose of the image, the who's going to be looking at it, and what context they're going to look at it, what kind of reaction we're going to want from somebody, has a powerful influence on the decisions we make in how we edit it, how we crop it. One more example we're going to go for here is, I want to show you, is I did, earlier in the year, I did a photo shoot for a author, writer, social commentator called Robin Yassin Kassab. And so he was needing a portrait. He's taken over as a editor or sub-editor, I can't remember exactly. Please forgive me, Robin, if you ever see this. I can't remember his exact role, but he basically is going to be a bit more prominent. He needed to have a picture that was going to, basically, to put out into the world for the world of publishing. But what we needed to do was we needed a few variations. And this again comes down to purpose. So if you're talking about a portrait, we're talking about a headshot for the most part. It's not just about doing a passport photo. A passport photo might give you a likeness, but it's not necessarily projecting any kind of mood or image. So if I show you this one, so this is like the main portrait, the one we started with after playing around with selecting, trying out different moods, different feels. I've got the lighting I want. We've got this neutral background that we're wanting. I've got a colour scheme that I'm really quite happy with. Robin has got these piercing blue eyes. He's also got this blue shirt on, and then that kind of complementing with the sort of slightly warmer browns of the background and the kind of waistcoat that he's wearing as well. And in this one, we're going for a sense of authority. Okay, there's an authority, there's a strength, this is somebody who knows what he's talking about. Okay. He does a lot of social commentary on things going on in the Middle East, both from Syria, currently what's happening in Israel, Palestine. He's been called in as an expert to talk about some of these issues on radio, on TV before now. So there are times when he needs to project a certain amount of authority. The other thing is with Robin, though, is whilst he is incredibly knowledgeable on these things and can be very authoritative on these things, that's not all he is. He's also a warm, friendly person you can chat to on a whole bunch of different subjects, and he makes excellent coffee. So we took this photo, but then we also took this one. And this one then is warmer, friendlier. We're going for a gentle smile. We're not going for that kind of, I know what I'm talking, I am the person here. We're now just doing a little bit more kind of, here we are, slightly more friendly, a little bit more approachable. But then also what we did was do one with the glasses on. And, at this point then we've got glasses, smart, totally different look and feel. Here, Robin is, and he's an intellectual. And in this one, he looks much more like the intellectual. He looks friendly. He looks approachable. Completely different mood and feel. And this is the point to understand, that this photo, and this photo are all taken under exactly the same lighting conditions, from exactly the same angle, with exactly the same settings on the camera. Okay, but this photo and this photo give an entirely different impression of who Robin is. An extraordinarily important point. Which photo is he going to use? And it will depend on the where it needs to be seen. Who's going to be looking at it? What impression he wants them to take away from them. Is this an intellectual writer who you're going to enjoy his writing and it's going to be interesting? Is it an authority on the subject who you should listen to, and he absolutely knows what he's talking about, but he's not going to take any flack from anybody without putting up a fight. Okay, different kind of feel entirely. Another shot we did, some of you may remember when I was talking about doing stuff with sort of reflections and what have you. He's got this wonderful writing room, this writing cabin, separate from the house, and beautiful views in the Galloway Hills in Scotland. And I wanted to get this shot where you can then see him, and he's got his coffee, and we're looking through the window, and at the same time we've got the reflections of the landscape he's looking at. So getting this sort of double setup here, and this gives a different kind of feel again. Here you've got an author, you can see he's wearing exactly the same thing, it's all shot at the same time, but you have a very different feel of it again. Now you've got this person in a particular environment. He's, where we've got the coffee mug here and the cup in the hand and all the books in the background. This is in the writer's room. Then we did another shot to change the mood again completely. This one gives you a totally and utterly different feel again. Okay, so now we're inside. We've got the beautiful Galloway landscape behind him. He's sitting there editing through what he's, or making notes on what he's reading. But we've got a sort of slightly more domestic scene where we actually got the log burner going away in the background. There's camera, laptop case down here. We've got a box of files, bits and pieces sitting on top of the writing desk. So a very different kind of scene again. Okay, so purpose. Again, each of these is an image of Robin. What we're doing is trying to predict a certain, under different circumstances, he's going to need a different version of himself to create a different image, to create a different reaction in the people who are taking a look at it. And then another little bit of fun, where we just edited this to look basically like an old photograph, black and white, high grain, bits of contrast, and at this point it looks like it could be from the 1930s. But it's that whole point of understanding then who's going to be looking at it and what reaction are you wanting to get. So a couple of comments here. Vici says, beautiful shot with the reflections. April says, I love the writer's room. And Vici says, what a view to wake up to. This is true. So, excuse me. Where am I? So with all this then, I think this was the important point I want to make. So if we then go back to Amarjeet's picture of the burned dead dog, which for those of you who've turned up late, I haven't shown if you want to rewind. I've talked this has come out of the idea of why I'm not showing it. And it's about purpose. Now, if your purpose is to shock, is to grab attention through shocking imagery, then you understand that. If you don't understand the impact your photo is going to have on somebody else, then you're missing a chunk of understanding what photography is about. And this is really kind of why I wanted to bring up the whole subject in the first place. That we need to understand, as best we can, the impact our imagery is going to have. Certainly, if we want to be successful in whatever way we measure success with our photos. Now, that level of success might be we win more competitions or score more highly in the competitions or contests. It might be that we gain more business because this is, or it might be that we sell more products, or we gain more subscribers, or we get more people seeking us out and asking us to appear on as authorities on people's podcasts or news item programs or daytime living shows, lifestyle shows, or anything like that. Whatever, once we understand the purpose, who's going to be looking at it, what kind of reaction we're going to get, then we get such a better understanding of how successful or otherwise our images are going to be. And if you don't understand purpose, you're missing the biggest chunk of what photography is about. Everything else we do, everything we learn in terms of composition, in terms of light, in terms of editing, line, form, all the technicals, everything that I talk about every week on these podcasts is all a support mechanism to the purpose. So that's really what I wanted to talk about. I hope that's I've kind of got that across, and you haven't had to see a dead dog to prove the point. So that basically brings us to the end of the podcast, pretty much. So next week, like I say, next week will be a feedback session, and yes, so make sure you send me your images. Send me something, because certainly if you don't want to look at any pictures of dead dogs, send me an alternative. And I will, but send me your images to get feedback or ask questions, or if you have any ideas about particular themes or ideas you would like me to do a podcast about that are vaguely photography related, then let me know. You can email me directly, kim@kimayres.co.uk, or go to the Facebook group Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres and put your question and your images in there. So so thank you very much to Nurije, and thank you to Amarjeet too for sending in the images. It certainly gave us ideas to think about and lots to discuss. Have a great weekend, and have a happy Diwali to everyone who celebrates. Take care. Bye-bye.